Welcome to Experience Junkies. On this show, I spotlight meeting and event professionals, global travelers, jet setters, and more to relive the moments we never want to forget. More importantly, we'll attempt as best we can to transport listeners to transformational points in our lives, sharing our observations and emotions behind these stories. By diving into the indelible impact these experiences have had on us, we decode small takeaways about how to be better humans than we were yesterday. I know on Experience Junkies, we don't typically have what I would call adrenaline junkies on the show, but I am joined today by a repeat triathloner, Brett Musco. Brett has an interesting take on the accessibility and welcoming spirit of the triathlon community, and how he makes training and experiencing the events a whole family affair. Listen in as I chat with Brett on why more people should consider joining the adventure sports lifestyle. Welcome back to the Experience Junkies podcast. Today I have with me Brett Musco. He is a triathlon athlete. I liked when I had a conversation with him before the episode that he told me the reasons that he does triathlons, might surprise you just a little bit. It's not the typical kind of adrenaline junkie that you might expect. So I'm so happy to have you here, Brett. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I've been a huge fan and we look forward to our conversation.
Awesome. So before we start, go ahead and tell the people a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so, I am based on the East Coast of the U.S., and, I've been kind of involved in endurance sports since around 2017, so going on about 5 years now. I started out by doing a charity open water swim, and then, I kind of fell down the hole of, getting into running, getting into marathons, and now I actually do triathlons and started at some of, the shorter distances. And now I've worked my way up in the last year to do a full distance Ironman triathlon in 2021.
Now, I somewhat consider myself an athlete, but let me just say running anything more than a mile never has appealed to me. I'm not the strongest swimmer, and I haven't rode a bike since I was a kid. So kind of give the audience a little bit of reasoning behind what drew you to triathlons and really kind of these races and competitive sports in general.
Yeah, so I actually was not an athlete really at all. I was mediocre at high school golf many years ago and did pretty much nothing in college. So I definitely didn't come from a running background, and I guess walking a golf course counts, but questionable.
Right.
I think what has drawn me, and I got involved by, I suffered some injuries in college, started swimming, and then I had always observed for 20 years growing up this charity swim near my parents, and that kind of got me, something I really wanted to go after and try and experience. So that was kind of like my first, I guess, pun intended, dipping my toe in the water.
I like that.
Of some athletic stuff. But, one thing that has really drawn me to triathlon is, the challenge of it. The fact that, 100-meter dash, you're racing other athletes. But with triathlon, you're not. You're really challenging yourself to do better. And it's really more of a, can I better myself? And can I push myself beyond where I've gone before? And I think, actually going back to high school golf, I think there's some similar traits in those two sports of like, you're never going to play a perfect round of golf. You could always have done a little bit better. You're never going to have a perfect triathlon. You're always kind of working to improve and take those next steps. I'm also, a science and math person. I do project management outside of it. So I think it kind of ties into that personality that I have a little bit there too.
Thanks for providing some context. So for all the either non-athletes or like people that didn't play sports as a child, let Brett be your inspiration. Like it's never too late to try and to start. So appreciate that you went from like relatively, golf. And I totally understand. I did golf for 1 year in high school and haven't done it since because that's how mediocre or bad I was. But yeah, so anyone can start being active or doing some type of activity at any age, regardless of what your previous experience was. So thanks for stating that. And I really appreciated that you mentioned triathlons are not racers competing against other racers. It's you're competing with yourself. And
Yeah.
what have you learned in that process of doing these triathlons and competing with yourself? Like, what has that process of always trying to just better like your personal time and how you compete? How has that impacted you?
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's a couple ways, it's really impacted me. One thing actually to kind of add to what you said before about triathlon that's awesome is that there are all these different distances you can do, kind of like running. So like you don't have to go
Mm-hmm.
out there and do an Ironman. You can kind of, begin to scale out your own pace, whether it starts at something really short and then say like, oh, maybe I could do something a little bit longer. Maybe I could actually try
Right.
this. And continuing to push that comfort zone has been something I've really kind of learned. Is like, really being like, okay, I can get this under my belt. I can take this small bite. Now I can actually push to something further. The other thing I think it's really taught me is, I am, I guess you would consider me very type A. I like being very structured. I like having a schedule. It's taught me that, like, sometimes I have to break out of that.
Mm.
Especially in longer triathlons, it's such a long event. Stuff isn't going to go according to plan. You're gonna drop something. You're gonna have a mechanical issue with your bike, or you don't know. Maybe it's gonna start snowing or raining. Not saying that's gonna
Right.
happen in the middle of the race, but you have to be able to cope and do better on that. And you can't always compare 1-to-1 of like how I did in this race to that race because different conditions, different days, different weather, different events, but really being able to reflect and look back at like how you adjusted on the fly and how you're able to be flexible and kind of that challenge aspect of it too.
Knowing that you briefly mentioned the Ironman, and no one has to go out and run an Ironman, but can you give a little bit of context? And for anyone out there that doesn't know what a triathlon is, what a basic triathlon is, and kind of how an Ironman might differ.
Yeah. Yeah. So really in triathlon, in multi-sport races as a whole, there's kind of a whole different set of them. Triathlon typically is you swim, you then do a bike immediately afterwards, and you run. There are variations of stuff like duathlons where you don't do the swimming if you're not comfortable with the swimming, where you just do the bike and the run. So there's all these kind of different perspectives. They really range in distance. The standard, if you watch the Olympics, a lot of people, see triathlon there for the first time. The standard distance there is, you're swimming a mile, you're biking 25, and you're running 10 kilometers, so about 6 miles. But there are
Wow.
some that are shorter than that, about half that size, what's considered like a sprint distance. An Ironman is a much longer version of that. It's actually about 4 times that length. So in an Ironman, you're swimming
Wow.
for 2.4 miles. You're then biking 112 miles. Once you get done with all that, you run a full marathon at the end of it. So it's an event that takes athletes. They normally are given a cutoff of 17 hours to complete it. And it would take, athletes
Hmm.
anywhere between, 9 hours and that 17 hours to complete.
Wow. So essentially a full day of activity.
Yes, yeah. And
Oh my
one thing
goodness.
crazy that people don't realize is it's 17 hours from race start, but a lot of us are there for many hours beforehand, setting up, getting nutrition ready. So the race may start at sunup at like 7 a.m., but most people are there around 4 a.m. Setting up their bikes, getting their gear ready. So it really becomes almost 4 a.m. to midnight for a lot of people. And then by the time they get home, it's a full night.
What's interesting is I know you mentioned that you really incorporate your family with these runs in terms of traveling with you around the country to go to different ones. Why is it so important for you to include your family? And how, if you mentioned, the prep and you may actually be there closer to 24 hours, how do, your wife and your kids, cope with that?
Yeah, I mean, people look at endurance sports as a lot of times being very individual because you see someone out biking alone, someone out running alone, but really it's not. And it really is almost it's a full-time hobby. It's a full-time lifestyle that you're in. And to do that, I couldn't do it without my family. I couldn't do it without my wife understanding, I'm going to go out and ride for 5 hours on a Saturday, or, I'm going to be going to bed early because, I have a big workout and really being there to support me.
Hmm.
It's not a individual thing. It takes a team. It takes whether that's your family, your community, your friends. It's a full team effort. And so it's really important for me to have them there on the race because it's kind of like, the race is like the tip of the iceberg. There's so much that's going into it beforehand. And that race really isn't, people see it as the main event. For me and for my family,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of the celebration at the end of it. It's the celebration of the road we've
Mm.
gone down to get there. So it's really important for me to have them there because it's as much a celebration for me, but also a celebration for them because they've gotten me to that finish line. Hopefully to the finish line if I reach it there, but they've gotten me
Right,
got to
right.
me got to me to that day. So for me, I like to travel a lot too. So it's always fun to do races in new cities and have my family come along to see those new cities. And I normally like to do my big race kind of end of the year. Obviously, being on the East Coast here in the Northeast, kind of October, November, outside activities die down a little bit. Definitely no
Right.
swimming. So, try to do a big race kind of end of the year at a destination where they can come along. So, stuff that we've done before is, my parents came down with me to Waco to do a race down there in 2019. My mom loved Chipped and Joanna Gaines, so going down to Magnolia Mocha down there was a great
Oh,
trip to see
nice.
afterwards. Going out to kind of Indiana or New York City, where I have some siblings with my family, my wife, and making a trip out of it, going along and, spending some time there afterwards when I can kind of unwind, explore a new city, enjoy time with them, and really kind of soak in the celebration. That is kind of the end of the season and the end of the year. And I have to say, like, while it's a 4 day effort for me, it's a 4 day effort for them out there cheering.
Yeah.
They're crazy with the signs. I mean, my wife sometimes at my Ironman, I think she clocked in like 5 to 8 miles of walking just running
Oh,
around,
wow.
trying to keep up with me and taking photos and the family text message of how I'm doing. It's always great and it really fuels me in my races and even after my races to know they're supporting me and that I'm celebrating what I've accomplished and how much they've gotten me to.
That's just so beautiful, Brett, that, like your whole family's involved, your parents, your wife, your kids, and how do you try and incorporate special family moments on race day, especially with you kind of being focused on the task at hand? Yeah, they're pouring love and everything into you, but how do you guys try to make either points of like connection between everyone or just, extra little special memories that you can take with you after the race?
Yeah, so it's always just the little things. Whether it be signs that I keep or trying to scout them out, give them high fives as I'm going by. And actually for Indiana, I packed up my wife I called it my tri-sherpa survival kit. It was
Mm-hmm.
a whole bunch of stuff for her to do on the day when I'm out there for 10 hours. A tent, a book, some little bottles of wines and chocolates, little special memories we can do like that. And then obviously,
Right.
the experiences afterwards are always good memories, whether it be, road tripping back or, spending time afterwards, having that actual celebration with them. But really, some of the most special things are just seeing them on the course and having that interaction. This last year, I got to do the New York City Marathon, and it was the first time
Wow.
my brother's new baby girl, who was
Oh.
just under 1 year old, was out there, could steer along the course, and that was just super special and just something I'll always internally remember. I know.
Yeah, that's really nice. Now, on actual race day, you kind of talked about lengths and miles and distance for all the activities on a Ironman, especially. I'm just thinking of the physical toll that takes. People that run a marathon, usually their body is achy, their feet are blistery. So when you tack on a bike race and swimming onto that as well, I just can't imagine the physical feeling and toll it takes on your body. What is your why when you're out there on foot, on bike, in the water, and like what keeps you going? Because I know there have to be moments of pain during that process.
Yeah. There definitely is moments of pain, and I definitely think like the physical toll is one thing, but the mental toll and the mental focus it takes to really be in the moment at that point in time and for that long period of time. One thing actually interesting about triathlon that maybe some people don't know is that actually you're not allowed any electronics when you're out there. So you're almost completely disconnected
Oh,
with the
wow.
world for that time. There's no music in your head. You're purely there
Mm,
mentally and focused. But for me, my why is one to push myself and to find, what my limit is, but also to find what I have in my body and know I can go before. A lot of people who train for something like a 5K or, a 100-meter dash event, right? They've run the 100-meter dash hundreds of times beforehand. When you're training for an Ironman, you never do an Ironman in practice. You have never done that
Right.
just because of that tool, right? So you're out there and you're doing it like I do it for Ironman. That's the first time I've ever done those in a row. And like, the push to say like, kind of trust my training, trust, where I've got into, and stay kind of that mentally focused, really keeps me driving and to find, what I'm capable of and maybe exceed what I think I'm actually capable of. The other thing I would say is triathlons, endurance sports, the best crowds I think I've ever seen. People always put up hilarious signs. People give you high fives, and I find that interacting with those crowds really is fuel. It is the motivation to see the little kids running out to give their parents a high five as they run by. Or, I actually, in one of my marathons, someone ran out with a box of donuts and ran alongside me and offered me a donut as I was running. I decided it was best not to take the donut, but, still, those little things really keep you going. And the community that is around triathlon really is motivational and drives us all to do better.
So you talked about the mental toll that it takes, to stay motivated, to keep going. And like the purpose of doing these races is to challenge yourself mentally. So obviously you're running and you're biking and you're swimming to prep for race day, but how do you get your mind in mental shape for, the task at hand?
Honestly, I don't know if there's a good way to get it necessarily in mental shape. I think there is, just learning and practice and then building trust in it. And, you have stuff go wrong in training and you kind of got to roll with those punches too. And kind of learn from that. Whether it's I'm out on a ride and I get a flat tire in training, still kind of pushing through. We all have kind of good days. We all have bad days. And we find a way to kind of, pick ourselves up and get through them and move forward. And I think, taking time to really reflect on those when you're in training also helps you on race day. I'm not going to say it's all, amazing on race day. There are moments of doubt. There are really dark moments in my mind, but you got to know how to kind of refocus on the big picture and what you're trying to accomplish and kind of push through. And I think that's something, you can kind of take to everyday life a lot and look at experiences. So, really, in my training, I do a lot of reflecting on, how things went. And, I learned the most from my bad days. I don't learn much from the workouts that go perfect and I hit everything I want to do and I ran faster than ever. Sure, that's a good feeling, but I really learn from the challenging days and really like to focus on those more than the successes.
You kind of talked about, the things that go through your mind. Can you walk us through, especially us non-athletes, some couch potatoes, or just triathloners, walk us through what goes through your mind during a race, like whether it's during the transitions between the activities or just if you're having a low patch, how you talk yourself out of it, like what's going through your mind in those moments?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really starts early in the day and really the week of. One thing about training is, those last couple of weeks, you're not doing a ton of training and it gets really nerve wracking. Those are like, I find those last 2 weeks before a race when you're in what's called a taper period the hardest. Because you feel like you're not doing anything, you're worried you didn't do enough, you're stressing about packing. So, really trying to focus your mind there is always a challenge, and really trying to visualize, I think, before the race is something I always try to do, whether it be in transition the morning of, running through checklists. On actual race day, if things are going well and things are feeling good, it's almost like a zen, almost like a meditation that you kind of get into, especially I find on the bike. One thing about Ironman is you have to be very strict about your nutrition when you're fueling on the bike. Simply, you have to eat a lot of food. You're burning, 10,000 calories in the race. You got to consume that while you're racing. So, you kind of have practiced this set schedule where I know, every 10 minutes, every 15 minutes, I'm going to be taking in some food, some water. I'm going to go through an aid station and swap out a water bottle. But eventually, you practice this so much that it becomes almost kind of like second nature. And like,
Mm,
you almost just are in the moment, taking it in. One thing, we all have these gadgets telling us our pace, our power, our speed.
right.
I often like to just turn them off and not focus on them and just listen to how my body is feeling during the race and listening to,
Mm-hmm.
that rather than, what some number is telling me. That's where I find I perform the best. I think in terms of the dark moments that there's no good way to really focus with them, but we just kind of think of like, sometimes you see it and sometimes things don't go your way and you just got to focus on what you have accomplished. I know at Ironman Indiana I stumbled into someone right in after I finished. They were just entering transition. They just got off the bike and they actually had missed the cutoff time, so they weren't going to
Oh,
be
wow.
allowed to go on to the run. And they were pretty upset, and I was talking to them and I was like, at the same time, like, you just swam 2.4 miles and biked over 100. Like,
Right.
99% of people couldn't do that. Like, that is an accomplishment. And
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
sometimes you got to remind yourself of that and just push through and do your best. And if that means you're walking the back half of the marathon, so
Hmm.
be it. I mean, you live, you learn, and you just got to kind of look at what you've got to do and how you've got to there.
That's the beauty of these events, right? The community that surrounds them. And what have you found that you really cling to or really cherish the most about whether it's the Ironman community or just, triathlon community in general? What do you get from other people like yourself that embark on these type of races?
Yeah, I think it's really just the kind of endurance sport community. A lot of people, I think, on the outside, see the professionals and they see like these intense, really focused, but the actual
Right.
community is so welcoming and warm. And you go there and people aren't there to sabotage each other, aren't there to beat each other. They're there
Hmm.
to we are in this together. And it's
Right.
while in some aspects, I think there's ways it can be more diverse. One thing I do love is that you go there and you see people in all walks of life. That you show up to these races and you have everyone from, you know, teenagers who are doing their first race to, the family getting out of their car with, the 6 to 7 to 8 year old who they woke up at 6 a.m. and they're cheering for
Right.
them. To you have people doing these races who are 75 to 80 and out there and all kind of collaborating, all going
Hmm.
together. Before the race, people are always super helpful. I actually had a bit of a wardrobe malfunction in one of my races this year.
Oh
The
no.
at this
Not a
at the
Janet,
start
not a
line,
Janet Jackson moment.
not as bad, but at the start line, my the zipper to my top broke. Instantly, I think
Ah, gotcha.
I had five people trying to fix it for me. I had someone brought me over Bobby, like just like incredible amount of support. And even after the race, just like strangers grabbing drinks together or sharing kind of those war stories afterward. I traveled to one race this year. It was actually the first time I've done a race alone. My wife couldn't come along with me, and I was down in North Carolina. And the community was so welcoming with, people offering like, hey, we know you're here alone. Like, people will make signs for you. They make these lists and they cheer for you out of town. Or just afterwards, I end up getting drinks with, five complete random strangers who I never met before in the community. And now, we bump into each other at races and we talk and
Right.
hang out. So I'm definitely just a super warm, collaborative community to kind of get through these events.
It reminds me of CrossFit because I think there's a similar
Yeah.
negative connotation with it. Like even myself, before I ever tried it, I assumed that it was all, you see the people that do the CrossFit games and they're super competitive and like ripped, and you're like,
Yeah.
I can't do that. And then when I started going, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's people of all walks of life, like you mentioned, young, old, people that are obese and overweight that are doing, modified exercises if need be. And it's a very welcoming kind of like when you're in the workouts together, you're helping each other. There's a lot of partner workouts and it's like cheering each other on. So I totally understand what you mean about, outside looking in, maybe it's a little bit more competitive than it actually is for those who are participating, and it's really more welcoming and,
Yeah.
encouraging than people may think.
Yeah, even I would say even in the races, like the athletes, like I mean, the spectators are incredible. Even the athletes, people are encouraging each other. Like if
Hmm.
someone passes you or you pass someone, there's almost always a word saying like, "Oh, great job, keep on going." People aren't like upset
Right.
to see people passing them. There's kind of like,
Hmm.
"Wow, good job." Or if you see someone struggling, people stop, people help.
Wow.
And one actually Ironman tradition that's super special that I think maybe people don't know about is this return to the finish line. So in a lot of the
Mm.
races, the pros, the early finishers, we all come back and we cheer in the final finisher of that race. And in some
Yeah.
cases that might be 10 hours, 9, 10 hours after you finished. So you might finish,
Wow.
you might go home, have lunch, take a shower. People come back and they cheer on that final finisher. In the
Nice.
end, we all have completed the same course. We all completed the same challenge in different times, maybe, but we all got through it. And it's really a special moment to see and always great to be there for.
Kind of like a no soldier left behind feeling,
Yeah,
essentially.
absolutely. Yeah.
Well, Brett, this has been so great. I've loved this conversation, and I'm so glad that you joined. But one last question before we wrap up. If you had to pick a song to convey the experience of running a triathlon, whether it's an Ironman or another triathlon, or even just the experience of training and getting ready for race day, what would that song be and why?
Oof. This is a hard question. One, I think because uh, we're not allowed to have music, so I can't actually listen to music. So what I'm actually hearing
Right.
on the course is just whatever spectators blasting. So you might find me running and
Hmm.
dancing along to just random tunes on the side of the course.
Yeah, very eclectic.
I think actually two songs come to mind for me if I'm allowed to go with two. But I think the first is
Absolutely. It's your world. We're just living in it.
so the first, I guess, is Sound of My Dad. He's a big classic rock fan, but one song I always remember growing up was the song "Show of Life" by Fish, actually. And I
Hmm.
think that song to me really reflects the whole community around it, everyone who's out there that day,
Right.
and also just taking in the crowds and in the experience in the moment. And really, appreciating everyone who's there, everything that's going on, and not being so focused and regimented, and really welcoming community. I guess
Yeah.
a more modern song that also comes to my mind is "Can't Hold Us" by Macklemore. One
Oh,
great
okay.
pump up song. So if anyone's at a race,
Yeah.
please play that. We all love it. It keeps us going.
Yeah.
But
Universal playlist.
yeah, universal playlist right there. There's particularly one I think I have this song like memorized at some point, so it's great because I can sing it to myself while I'm running, although I'm an awful singer. Uh, and there's one line where he really talks about just to live life, and that like you have your family, your friends, your city, your community behind you, and that you can lean on them when you fail, you can lean on them when you have hard days, and you can lean on them to get energy. And that's really something
Right.
that's important to me, whether you have a family who can make all the races, or whether you've built your own family with your friends, or whether you built it with the community. Really, in triathlon, that community there is to support us, and it's what gets us through it. And that song really resonates with me on that part.
Nice. Well, you are the first guest to offer two songs, so that's an Experience Junkies little milestone there.
Super.
Now, before we sign off, Brett, let people know where they can find you on the interwebs, if you want to be found, that is.
Yeah. No, I'm always super pumped to connect. So I do have an Instagram at Keep On Trying that you can find. I also do have a website/blog I have been starting up. Really easy to remember, brettmusco.com. And if anyone is really interested in learning more about it, they can definitely reach out to me there. I always like trying to bring new people into the community, the sport, get people started, because it really is different than what it looks like from the outside. So yeah, definitely if you want to reach out to me, there, that'd be great.
Yeah, we may have a new Ironman or triathloner that comes as listening to this episode. But
That'd be
thanks
great.
so much for thanks so much for joining today, Brett. It's been great having this conversation, and I appreciate you joining.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for having me on, and look forward to listening to future podcasts too.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Experience Junkies podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review on Apple or Spotify so that other listeners can find the show. Be sure to join our Discord channel. This is a great place for you to give feedback, talk with me, talk with our guests and other listeners, and share your Experience Junkie tales. Thank you for listening. Have a great rest of your day.